In the heart of a desolate forest, a dying bear drags itself through the underbrush, each step a battle against its failing body. Its once mighty form is now frail, barely able to stand. For days, it has been fleeing from a relentless fever and an infection that has claimed its strength, leaving it alone in the wilderness. As the bear stumbles closer to the campsite, the thick trees begin to part, and it collapses in front of a soldier sitting by the fire. Private Jake Monroe, stationed alone on a remote mission, looks up from the fire just as the bear's massive form hits the ground with a thud. His hand instinctively grips the rifle at his side, heart racing, unsure whether the creature is a threat or a victim. But as the soldier approaches cautiously, something unimaginable happens. The bear looks up at Jake, its eyes clouded with pain and desperation. In a moment that seems to stretch on forever, the soldier sees a flicker of understanding in the animal's gaze. With a final breath, the bear lets out a low growl, as though pleading for something more than its own survival. And then, as if driven by an unspoken bond, Jake kneels beside the beast, his training in survival and compassion igniting something deep within him. In a twist of fate, Jake finds himself doing the unthinkable. He tends to the dying bear, offering comfort and medicine from his first aid supplies. As the night deepens, Jake works tirelessly to clean the bear's wounds and administer antibiotics. He marvels at the creature's tenacity, its will to live despite the odds stacked against it. The bear's labored breathing fills the air, punctuated by the crackling of the fire and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Jake reflects on his own journey, the events that led him to this solitary post in the middle of nowhere. He had always been drawn to the wilderness, finding solace in its untamed beauty. But this mission was different. It was a test of his resilience, a chance to prove himself not only as a soldier but as a human being. As dawn approaches, Jake settles beside the bear, exhausted but determined. He knows that the next few days will be critical, that the bear's fate rests in his hands. And yet, he feels a strange sense of purpose, as though this unexpected encounter has given his mission a new meaning. Days pass, and the bear's condition slowly improves. Jake maintains a vigilant watch, tending to the creature's needs and monitoring its progress. He forages for berries and roots, supplementing the bear's diet with nutrient-rich offerings from the forest. As the bear regains its strength, Jake begins to notice subtle changes in its demeanor. The once wary creature now regards him with a measure of trust, its eyes following his movements with a newfound curiosity. Jake finds himself talking to the bear, sharing stories of his past and his hopes for the future. In the stillness of the forest, an unlikely bond forms between the soldier and the bear. They become companions in solitude, each drawing strength from the other's presence. Jake marvels at the bear's resilience, its ability to overcome even the most daunting of challenges. A week has passed since the bear's arrival, and Jake knows that the time has come for the creature to return to the wild. He has done all he can to ensure its recovery, but he understands that the bear belongs to the forest, not to him. With a heavy heart, Jake prepares for the bear's departure. He gathers a final offering of berries and fish, laying them out near the edge of the campsite. The bear, now standing tall and strong, approaches the offering with a cautious curiosity. As the creature begins to eat, Jake steps back, watching in silent reverence. He knows that this moment will stay with him forever, a testament to the power of compassion and the resilience of the wild. And as the bear finishes its meal and turns to disappear into the forest, Jake feels a sense of pride and gratitude, knowing that he has played a small but significant role in its journey. Months have passed since Jake's encounter with the bear, and life at the remote outpost has returned to its usual rhythm. But the memory of that fateful night lingers, a constant reminder of the unexpected connections that can form in the face of adversity. Jake continues his duties, patrolling the surrounding wilderness and maintaining the campsite. But now he sees the forest through different eyes. Every rustle of leaves, every distant call, carries with it the possibility of another extraordinary encounter. As the seasons change, Jake finds himself drawn deeper into the forest's mysteries. He begins to study the plants and animals around him, learning their names and their ways. He discovers hidden streams and ancient trees, each one a testament to the enduring power of nature. One crisp autumn morning, Jake sets out on a routine patrol, his mind wandering to the bear and the lessons it had taught him. As he makes his way through the forest, he stumbles upon a sight that stops him in his tracks. There, in a small clearing, stands the bear, its fur now a healthy, glossy black. But it is not alone. At its side, two small cubs play, tumbling and wrestling in the fallen leaves. Jake watches in awe, his heart swelling with emotion. He realizes that the bear's journey did not end with its recovery, but rather, it was just the beginning. The creature had not only survived but thrived, passing on its strength and resilience to a new generation. As if sensing his presence, the bear turns, its eyes meeting Jake's. In that moment, a silent understanding passes between them, a recognition of the bond they had shared and the impact they had on each other's lives. Inspired by the bear's journey, Jake begins to see his own mission in a new light. He realizes that his purpose extends beyond mere survival, that he has the power to make a difference, no matter how small. He starts by making small changes around the campsite, planting seeds and tending to the saplings that sprout from the earth. He creates a small garden, nurturing it with the same care and dedication he had shown the bear. As the garden grows, so too does Jake's sense of purpose. He begins to see the campsite not just as a temporary outpost, but as a symbol of hope and renewal. He imagines a future where the wilderness and humanity can coexist, where compassion and understanding can bridge even the widest of divides. As the weeks turn into months, Jake's garden becomes a thriving oasis, a patch of color and life amidst the forest's greens and browns. He takes pride in every blossom, every ripe fruit, knowing that each one is a testament to his hard work and dedication. But Jake's efforts do not go unnoticed. Slowly, word of his garden spreads, reaching the ears of his fellow soldiers and the nearby communities. People begin to visit the campsite, drawn by the promise of fresh produce and the chance to witness something truly remarkable. Jake welcomes them all, sharing his knowledge and his passion for the land. He teaches them about the plants he has grown, about the delicate balance of the ecosystem and the importance of preserving it. And in return, they share their own stories, their own hopes and dreams for a better future. As the visitors to the campsite increase, Jake realizes that his small garden has become something much larger. It has become a symbol of unity, a place where people from all walks of life can come together and find common ground. He begins to organize gatherings, inviting the local communities to join him in celebrating the bounty of the land. They share meals and stories, forging new connections and strengthening old ones. Jake watches as the campsite transforms, evolving from a solitary outpost to a hub of activity and community. He sees the power of small acts of kindness, how they can ripple outwards, touching lives in ways he never could have imagined. But even as the campsite thrives, Jake knows that challenges still lie ahead. The wilderness is a harsh and unforgiving place, and there are those who would seek to exploit it for their own gain. When a group of poachers is spotted in the area, Jake springs into action. He rallies the community, organizing patrols and setting up a network of watchers to keep the forest safe. It is a tense and difficult time, but Jake remains steadfast in his commitment to protecting the wilderness and all the creatures that call it home. He draws strength from the bear's memory, from the lessons it had taught him about resilience and the power of compassion. In the end, it is the community's unity that proves to be the poacher's undoing. Together, they are able to drive the interlopers out, sending a clear message that the forest and its inhabitants are not to be trifled with. As the dust settles, Jake realizes that the campsite has become more than just a symbol of hope and renewal. It has become a beacon of strength, a testament to the power of coming together in the face of adversity. He knows that there will be more challenges to come, more battles to be fought, but he also knows that he will not face them alone. He has the support of the community, the wisdom of the wilderness, and the memory of a bear that had taught him the true meaning of resilience. As the seasons turn and the years pass, Jake watches as the campsite and the surrounding forest continue to thrive. The garden becomes a permanent fixture, a source of sustenance and beauty for all who visit. Jake himself becomes a fixture as well, a respected leader and a mentor to the younger generations. He shares his knowledge and his passion, inspiring others to follow in his footsteps and become stewards of the land. And through it all, the memory of the bear remains, a constant reminder of the unexpected connections that can form in the face of adversity. Jake carries that memory with him, a source of strength and inspiration in even the darkest of times. Years turn into decades, and Jake grows old, his once youthful face now lined with the wisdom of a life well lived. But even as his body ages, his spirit remains as strong and vibrant as ever. He spends his days tending to the garden, sharing stories with the children who come to visit. He tells them of the bear, of the lessons it had taught him and the bond they had shared. And as he speaks, he sees the wonder in their eyes, the spark of curiosity and compassion that he knows will carry them far. He realizes that his legacy will live on, not just in the garden or the campsite, but in the hearts and minds of all those he has touched. Chapter 14. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves begin to turn and the air takes on a familiar chill, Jake sets out on a final journey into the forest. He moves slowly now, his steps measured and deliberate, but his destination is clear. He makes his way to the clearing where he had first encountered the bear all those years ago. There, amidst the fallen leaves and the dappled sunlight, he settles himself on the ground, his back against the trunk of an ancient tree. As he closes his eyes, he feels a sense of peace wash over him, a deep and abiding contentment that comes from a life well lived. He knows that his journey is coming to an end, but he also knows that his legacy will endure. And as he takes his final breaths, he sees the bear once more, a shimmering figure at the edge of his vision. It regards him with those same wise, knowing eyes, a final acknowledgement of the bond they had shared. Jake smiles, his heart full of gratitude and love. And as he slips away, he knows that he has lived a life of purpose, a life that had made a difference. He had learned the true meaning of resilience, of hope, and of the power of compassion to change the world, one small act at a time. As the legend of Jake Monroe and the bear spread throughout the region, it took on a life of its own. Stories traveled from village to village, changing slightly with each telling, growing more fantastic and inspiring with every retelling. Children would listen wide-eyed as elders spoke of the soldier who had saved a dying bear and built a community from wilderness. But there was one person for whom the story held special significance. Eliza Thornton, Jake's granddaughter, had grown up hearing tales of her grandfather's extraordinary life from her mother. Now a wildlife biologist in her mid-30s, Eliza had dedicated her career to studying the same forest that had shaped Jake's legacy. On the 20th anniversary of Jake's passing, Eliza made a pilgrimage to the old campsite. Though the original structures had long since returned to the earth, the garden remained, now a wild but recognizable tribute to her grandfather's vision. Ancient fruit trees, their branches heavy with autumn bounty, still stood sentinel over beds of herbs and vegetables that had naturalized throughout the clearing. "I finally made it, Grandpa," Eliza whispered, setting down her heavy backpack. Though she'd never met Jake in person, the stories and his journal, discovered among her mother's possessions after her passing last winter, had created a connection that transcended time. The journal contained detailed observations of the forest ecosystem, sketches of plants and animals, and most precious of all, Jake's personal reflections on his encounter with the bear. Reading his words, Eliza felt as though she knew him, understood the transformation that had occurred in this very spot decades ago. She had come to the forest with a purpose beyond mere remembrance. The region was under threat from developers who saw only profit in the ancient trees and clear streams. Using her grandfather's journal as a guide, Eliza planned to document the rich biodiversity of the area, gathering evidence to support its designation as a protected wilderness. As twilight descended on the forest, Eliza set up her modest camp near the remnants of Jake's garden. The stillness was occasionally interrupted by the calls of nocturnal creatures awakening to their nightly routines. She felt a profound sense of connection to the land, to her grandfather, to something larger than herself. Morning brought a symphony of birdsong and dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. Eliza began her work methodically, cataloging plant species, setting wildlife cameras, and collecting water samples from the nearby stream. Jake's detailed descriptions helped her locate several rare plant species that had thrived under his care. On her third day in the forest, while following a game trail that Jake had mentioned in his journal, Eliza froze at the sound of breaking branches. Heart racing, she slowly turned toward the noise, her hand instinctively reaching for the bear spray at her belt. There, not 30 feet away, stood a massive black bear. Its fur gleamed in the filtered sunlight, and its eyes, intelligent and assessing, fixed on her with unmistakable curiosity rather than aggression. Eliza's scientific mind raced through protocols for bear encounters, but something deeper, more intuitive, kept her rooted to the spot. The bear's size and the distinctive white patch on its chest suggested it was quite old, perhaps 15 or 16 years. With a start, she realized this could be a descendant of the very bear her grandfather had saved. "Hello there," she whispered, her voice barely audible even to her own ears. The bear huffed softly, its nostrils flaring as it caught her scent. For a long moment, they regarded each other across the forest floor, human and bear, connected by an improbable history. Then, with deliberate calm, the bear turned and ambled away, disappearing into the underbrush as silently as it had appeared. That night, huddled in her tent as rain pattered against the canvas, Eliza wrote feverishly in her own journal. The encounter had shaken her, not with fear but with a sense of profound continuity. She felt as though she had glimpsed the living embodiment of her grandfather's legacy. The next morning, Eliza discovered something remarkable. Following the bear's trail, she came upon a section of forest she hadn't yet explored. There, in a small clearing, stood several ancient fruit trees, apples and pears, that couldn't possibly be natural to the ecosystem. She recognized them immediately from Jake's descriptions, offspring of the very trees he had planted decades ago, their seeds carried into the wilderness, perhaps by the bears themselves. "You clever old man," she murmured, touching the gnarled bark of an apple tree. "You found a way to feed them, even after you were gone." Over the following weeks, Eliza's research revealed a complex relationship between the bear population and Jake's legacy. The fruit trees had provided a reliable food source, helping the bears survive harsh winters and contributing to a remarkably healthy population. The garden plants had naturalized throughout the region, increasing biodiversity and creating microhabitats for countless smaller species. When she returned to the university with her findings, Eliza's colleagues were astonished by the data. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Ramirez, her department head, remarked as he reviewed her report. "An inadvertent rewilding experiment that's been running for decades. The implications for conservation are enormous." Eliza's research became the cornerstone of a movement to protect the forest. Her presentations to environmental groups, government agencies, and local communities always began with Jake's story: the soldier and the bear, the garden that became an ecosystem, the compassion that transformed a wilderness. The developers fought back, of course, with arguments about progress and economic necessity. But they hadn't counted on the power of a good story. People who might have been swayed by promises of jobs and prosperity found themselves moved by the tale of Jake Monroe, the bear he saved, and the forest that had flourished under his care. A year after Eliza's initial expedition, she stood before a crowd gathered at the edge of the forest. Behind her, a simple wooden sign marked the boundary of the newly established Monroe Wilderness Preserve. The designation protected nearly 50,000 acres of forest, including Jake's campsite and the far-flung descendants of his garden. "My grandfather believed that small acts of kindness could change the world," Eliza told the assembled crowd. "He couldn't have known that saving one bear would ultimately save an entire ecosystem. He couldn't have imagined that planting a garden would create a legacy that would outlive him by generations." As she spoke, Eliza caught a glimpse of movement at the forest's edge. There, partially obscured by shadows, stood a bear, perhaps the same one she had encountered before. It observed the proceedings with what she could only describe as dignified interest before melting back into the protection of the trees. The preserve became a center for research and education. Eliza established a field station near the original campsite, where students and scientists could study the unique ecological dynamics of the forest. Local schools brought children for day trips, where they learned about conservation, biodiversity, and the importance of compassion for all living things. Eliza often led these expeditions herself, guiding wide-eyed children through the forest, showing them the descendant fruit trees, teaching them to recognize bear signs, and always telling them the story of her grandfather and the bear. The most important thing my grandfather taught us, she would tell them as they gathered in what remained of Jake's garden, is that everything is connected. Every act of kindness ripples outward in ways we can't possibly imagine. On the 10th anniversary of the preserve's establishment, Eliza organized a special commemoration. Former soldiers who had served with Jake, community members who had been touched by his garden, researchers who had studied the forest, they all gathered at the campsite to celebrate his legacy. As twilight settled over the gathering, Eliza unveiled a simple bronze plaque mounted on a boulder at the edge of the garden clearing. It bore an image of a soldier kneeling beside a bear, and below it, Jake's own words from his journal. In tending to one wounded creature, I found healing for myself. In planting one garden, I discovered the vastness of our connection to all living things. The wilderness has taught me that compassion is not a human invention, but nature's deepest wisdom. That night, after the guests had departed, Eliza remained at the campsite, sitting beside a small fire much as her grandfather had done decades before. The sounds of the forest enveloped her, the rustle of leaves, the occasional call of an owl, the distant splash of a fish jumping in the stream. "We did it, Grandpa," she whispered to the flames. "Your bear, your garden, your forest, they're safe now." As if in answer, a low huffing sound came from the darkness beyond the firelight. Eliza looked up, unsurprised and unafraid, as the outline of a bear appeared at the edge of the clearing. It stood motionless, regarding her with the same intelligent curiosity she had come to recognize. In that moment, Eliza understood something her grandfather had tried to express in his journal, that there are connections in this world that transcend our limited understanding, bonds formed across species and generations that defy explanation but demand recognition. The bear remained for several minutes before turning away, its departure as silent as its arrival. Eliza smiled, feeling a profound sense of continuity and purpose. Jake's story hadn't ended with his passing. It continued through her, through the protected wilderness, through the bears that still roamed these forests. As the years passed, Eliza's own hair turned gray and her steps slowed, but her passion for the preserve never diminished. She trained younger researchers to continue her work, established educational programs that reached thousands of children, and fought tirelessly against new threats to the wilderness as they arose. On her 70th birthday, Eliza's colleagues surprised her with the news that a newly discovered species of flowering plant found only in the Monroe Preserve had been named Monrea resiliens in honor of Jake and his legacy of resilience. "The cycle continues," she told the assembled researchers, her voice thick with emotion. "My grandfather couldn't have known that his small acts of kindness would create ripples that would still be expanding a century later. He couldn't have imagined that by saving one bear, he was helping to create a sanctuary that would one day protect countless species." That evening, Eliza made what she knew might be her final journey to the original campsite. Age and arthritis made the trek difficult, but she was determined to complete it one last time. As she settled beside the ancient apple tree that marked what had once been the center of Jake's garden, she felt a profound sense of completion. "The story goes on," she whispered to the twilight forest. "It didn't end with you, Grandpa, and it won't end with me. As long as there are bears in this forest, as long as your trees bear fruit, as long as people remember what compassion can accomplish, the story continues." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared above the canopy, Eliza thought she glimpsed a familiar shape at the forest's edge, the silhouette of a bear, standing tall and proud against the gathering night. Whether real or imagined, it felt like a benediction, a reminder that some connections transcend time and even death itself. The legacy of Jake Monroe and the bear he saved lived on, in the protected wilderness, in the thriving ecosystem, in the stories told around campfires, in the hearts of all who learned to see the natural world through eyes of compassion and wonder. And in that continuation, There was a kind of immortality more meaningful than any monument of stone or bronze could provide. As twilight settled over the Monroe Wilderness Preserve, a young researcher named Maya Chun made her way along a familiar trail. At 28, she represented the newest generation of scientists committed to studying and protecting Jake Monroe's legacy. Having worked under Eliza's mentorship for the past 5 years, Maya had absorbed not just scientific knowledge, but the spiritual connection to this place that made it special. Tonight marked the 50th anniversary of the preserve's establishment. Earlier, there had been speeches and ceremonies at the visitor center, but Maya had slipped away, drawn to the original campsite as so many before her had been. The old garden clearing looked magical in the fading light. Wildflowers had reclaimed much of the space, dancing among the deliberate plantings that still thrived after all these decades. The bronze plaque commemorating Jake gleamed dully in the last rays of sunlight. Maya set down her pack and began setting up the specialized equipment she'd brought. As the preserve's lead geneticist, she had spent the past 3 years conducting a remarkable study, tracking the genetic lineage of the preserve's bear population back through time, attempting to identify descendants of the original bear Jake had saved. "You won't believe what we found, Eliza," Maya whispered, though her mentor had passed away 5 years earlier. Speaking to Eliza's memory had become a habit during her solo research trips. Using DNA samples collected from hair snares, scat, and occasional tranquilized bears requiring medical attention, Maya had reconstructed a complex family tree spanning multiple generations. The results had astonished her. Roughly 60% of the current bear population carried genetic markers, linking them to what she now called the Monroe lineage. "Your grandfather's compassion literally shaped the genetic future of this ecosystem," she continued, setting up her small tent near the ancient apple tree that still produced fruit each autumn. As darkness fell completely, Maya lit a small, contained fire in the designated pit. "The Monroe lineage bears show significant differences in their stress hormone levels compared to bears from other regions," she murmured, making notes. "They're more curious, less aggressive toward humans at equivalent distances, and demonstrate more complex social behaviors, including multi-generational groupings during non-mating seasons." In essence, Maya was documenting something remarkable. The bears of Monroe Preserve appeared to be evolving along a different trajectory than their counterparts elsewhere, shaped by generations of protection and the unusual food security provided by Jake's naturalized garden plants. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond the firelight, and Maya looked up, unsurprised. The preserve's bears had grown accustomed to researchers and were known to observe them from a respectful distance. "Hello there," she said softly, repeating the greeting that had become traditional among the preserve staff when acknowledging their ursine neighbors. A low huff answered her, neither threatening nor fearful, merely acknowledging her presence. Through her night vision scope, Maya could make out the distinctive silhouette of Bear 117, a 13-year-old female she had been studying since her arrival at the preserve. DNA analysis had confirmed that 117 was a direct descendant of the Monroe lineage, possibly a 5th or 6th generation offspring of the original bear. Maya smiled as the bear settled at the edge of the clearing, seemingly content to observe the human visitor. This comfortable coexistence was precisely what made the preserve unique, what made Jake's story continue to resonate half a century after his passing. Local communities had also transformed around the preserve. What had once been struggling rural towns now thrived as centers for ecotourism and environmental education. The Bear Trail, connecting the visitor center to various observation points, attracted thousands of respectful visitors annually. Schools from across the country sent students for immersive wilderness experiences, each one beginning with the story of Jake and the bear. Maya's own journey to the preserve had begun with that story. As a troubled teenager growing up in an urban environment, she had participated in a wilderness therapy program that brought at-risk youth to the Monroe Preserve. Standing in this very clearing 15 years ago, hearing Eliza tell Jake's story, Maya had found something she hadn't known she was seeking, a sense of purpose and connection. Now she was carrying the research forward, using cutting-edge genetic analysis and behavioral ecology to document what Jake and Eliza had understood intuitively, that compassion could literally reshape the world in measurable scientific ways. Opening her journal, a paper one, despite her reliance on digital tools for her research, Maya began to write. Like Jake and Eliza before her, she felt compelled to record not just scientific observations but personal reflections on her connection to this place. 50 years of protection has revealed something our modern world often forgets: that healing is possible, that damage can be undone, that nature's resilience may be our greatest teacher and hope. What began as one soldier's act of compassion toward one suffering creature has cascaded through time, reshaping an ecosystem, creating refuge for countless species, and touching human lives across generations. The bears that now inhabit this preserve are neither fully wild nor domesticated. They exist in a new relationship with humans based not on fear or dominance but on mutual respect and distance. They are evolution in action, adaptation in real time, showing us possibilities we hadn't imagined. Maya paused in her writing as Bear 117 shifted position, moving slightly closer to the firelight. The bear's behavior confirmed years of observations. The Monroe lineage bears maintained a comfort zone with humans that was precisely calibrated, never threatening but never surrendering their essential wildness. In the morning, Maya would return to the research station with new data and observations to add to the longitudinal study that now spanned half a century. She would meet with the international delegation of conservation officials who had come to learn from the preserve's success. She would continue the scientific work of documenting and quantifying the Monroe effect, as it had come to be called in ecological circles. But tonight, in this clearing where it all began, Maya honored the less quantifiable aspects of Jake's legacy: the power of one person's compassion to ripple outward through time, the capacity of humans and wild creatures to find new ways of coexisting, the resilience of nature when given room to heal. As the fire burned down to embers and Maya prepared for sleep, Bear 117 remained at her watchful post. The descendants of the bear Jake had saved continued their ancient patterns: foraging, raising cubs, hibernating through harsh winters, but with subtle differences that spoke to the unique history of this place and these creatures. And in that data, in the thriving wilderness that surrounded her, Jake Monroe's legacy continued, a testament to the enduring power of compassion and the unexpected ways a single act of kindness could echo through generations, reshaping both the natural world and the human heart. As Maya drifted towards sleep, she whispered the words that had become something of a mantra among the preserve's staff. The story continues. In the darkness beyond the dying fire, Bear 117 huffed softly, as if in agreement. End of story.